And welcome to today's IT Pro Today webcast, 10 Security Threats to Your Remote Workforce, sponsored by Sonnet.io. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please press the Help widget on your player console to receive assistance in solving common issues. If at any time you are having audio difficulties or issues with advancing of the slides, please hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. Today's web seminar is being recorded and will be available on demand for 12 months starting tomorrow. You will receive an email when it is ready. Please feel free to submit any questions you may have for our speakers today in the Q&A widget on your screen. And with that, let's meet today's speakers. Cassandra Mack is a Carnegie Mellon certified CISO and the head of security and GRC at Spekit. Joining Cassandra for today's discussion is Dharmendra Mohan, or DM, who is the CEO at Sonnet.io. And with that, the floor is yours, Cassandra.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for joining me, DM. Great to meet all of you.
And nice to meet you all.
Go ahead. Yeah. Let's see, I think we're ready for the next slide, right?
Well, let me just briefly introduce Sonnet.io. I'm sure many people haven't heard. So yeah, it's a cloud service to provide access to your enterprise applications. All types of apps, whether it's thick clients, your SaaS apps, servers, with built-in security, zero trust, data protection, behavior-based analysis, and it's just basically a workspace that you can access through any browser to access all your tools without VPNs, without proxies, without any kind of agents.
So I think it's safe to say that remote work is not going anywhere. You know, we hear a lot about return to work mandates, but the proof is out there that companies are moving more and more out of their buildings. They're reducing costs, and they're really seeing the value of at least having a hybrid workforce. And if you look back to COVID, you know, we were forced as IT teams and security teams to quickly shift and figure out how to go remote. And in that, you know, we basically propelled ourselves forward faster than we ever would have, but we took a lot of shortcuts to get there. You know, I remember Googling, you know, how do we get 650,000 users remote in a short period of time with devices? Like, you couldn't even order devices. So it was a huge thing that we did, and now we need to take a step back and figure out how do we make sure it's right, and how do we right size for where we're going, and how do we make sure that we have the right tools, not just what we could get at the time, and, you know, cobble together to make a solution. There's also, oh, go ahead, DM.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, you know, with these back to return to work mandates, I think that there is no one shoe size that fits all. I think different companies and, you know, different verticals will behave differently. So there are companies that are doing full remote, there are companies who are doing full in office, and the rest of them are somewhere in between. And I think that ultimately, you know, we need to hire folks with the right skills at the right time. And so we need to cater for everybody, whether they are remote, whether they are completely in office, or, you know, they're hybrid. We need to build sort of tools that can cater for all kinds of employees out there or contractors out there.
That's a really good point, because the drag on our IT help desk and our IT teams is more than ever. In fact, it's trending up to 47% turnover in IT teams because of that excessive workload and just the extra strain. So we need to, you know, talk about how we do that. Let's see. We also, you know, we have quite a few changes coming down through the government that hits big companies. So, you know, SEC is now requiring boards to be more responsible for cybersecurity, and public companies also. So that's going to trickle down to the rest of us who are not required at that level, but also are part of the food chain for those bigger companies.
Right. I think that, you know, the generational and technological shift, I think all the remote workers or users are essentially used to of newer tools, you know, in their personal life. And I think that they expect that sort of experience even with the enterprise tools. And I think you mentioned, let's say, ChatGPT. I think many companies are banning ChatGPT, but then there is definitely a lot of advantage if the workers were to use ChatGPT. But I think we need to build tools where we can use these tools seamlessly from any browser, from any device, but be able to protect data So, if people are putting, let's say, company secrets into ChatGPT or getting some fake data out of ChatGPT, putting into the applications. So we need to provide checks and balances. Since Sign.io platform, we provide controls of, what data you can copy, what you can paste, what you can upload, download. So we basically need to provide these tools to make the users productive, but at the same time have the checks and balances for them to be able to take advantage of all the modern tools.
Yeah, I think that's a really good key call out, because right now, as a security person, I have almost zero visibility unless I buy a really expensive tool for data loss or, just even observability. I really don't have that. And even big companies are kind of not really wanting to prioritize that in their spend. They're looking at, what are the other really important security tools that I need to put in place? So being able to get that without spending a ton of money is pretty important. I think that's a good segue into user behavior, right?
Yeah, sure. Let's go there.
So I always tell the story of, like, every IT and security person I've met in the last 25 years has a great story about some user. We used to say, check to see if your computer is plugged in before you call the help desk, but it gets crazier, right? The more you get into IT, the more you realize that users have a lot of access. They touch a lot of things. And we have tons of users, right? It could be executives, employees, contractors, your customer base. And they often do a lot of stupid things that cause us a lot of extra work. So it's becoming a lot more unpredictable and complicated to be able to manage that and be accountable for the actions and protect our networks.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that, the user errors is sort of the biggest cause of security breaches. There is no malintent, but they are just busy and they end up doing errors. So I think our tools need to have built-in guardrails, both for users as well as for IT users. Let's say if they're downloading sensitive content, it's not their intention, but if a tool blocks it automatically, I mean, they are good to go. Like, okay, fine, yeah, I don't need to download. So it basically becomes a training for them as well. And I think that also from an IT perspective, IT needs to know how a new user that they onboarded is behaving, and they will make some mistakes in the beginning. And if they get sort of alerts as to, this is the mistake that they are doing, they can sort of identify training needs to correct that behavior. So yeah, I think definitely, I think we need to have sort of integrated guardrails on the tools to be able to correct that.
I like that, because right now we really, we have endpoint management software that tells us after the fact, after it's tried to correct something, but sometimes it's not able to correct something that's like an advanced persistent threat, or we have somebody in the middle of the night on a Tor browser doing the same thing over and over again and trying to figure out why it's not working. And meantime, they're infecting the entire network. So it would be great to kind of have something that says, hey, what you're doing does not make sense. Please stop, or consult your security team to make sure that what you're doing is safe.
Absolutely. I think many of these tools detect these kind of attacks or mistakes after the fact. I think you talked about the endpoint. Once the data is leaked, then you are trying to control in the endpoint, and then it's kind of too late to solve that. And similarly, I think from from IT standpoint, they have to dig through tons of logs to be able to figure out the mistake. I think that's like too much burden on IT to figure it out.
Sometimes it doesn't get done because it's just too much, or too much noise from the tools.
Right. I think the other one the slide talks about is BYOD and the shared devices. You want to cover that?
Yeah. So I think, that's a great segue to our next slide, which is, people are already using their phones to access networks with, now we have Office 365, we have G Suite, we have all kinds of tools that allow them to access from anywhere, which is now becoming more complicated because we have people working from home who can do moonlighting and contracting and freelancing. And, essentially we have this concept now of being overemployed, where people have 3, 4, 5 jobs. And so they want to use one laptop to access everything, which opens up each individual company that's on that laptop to having data transferred that's not authorized. And if you have no way to see that, you have no idea what's going on. And not to say that anyone has malintent there, but they're trying to simplify their life, and the current tools just don't allow for that.
No, I agree. I think especially with AI, folks are getting more and more productive and would like to work on their own terms. Doesn't have to be a full-time employee in a company. Can be working in multiple companies, or they are just working for a couple of weeks, and then also like they are contractors. And I think that the number of people who prefer to work that way is going to increase, and we need to have tools to be able to solve for such folks to be able to access the right tools. And so with Sonnet.io workspaces, we basically allow access to tools from any of the browser, from any device, with integrated security. So even if they are using their own personal devices, they can access all the tools, and still the applications and the data contained in those applications is protected by layers of security, like behavior-based content protection, air gapping from attacks from on the device, because it's kind of hard to solve the problem of protecting every device. They may be using multiple devices. The type of devices is also changing now. We have AR, VR type devices. So how do you solve that? You can't like put some sort of software in all of those devices. So we need to be able to solve the problem without actually sort of controlling devices or putting software in those devices.
Yeah, I think a key call out there is, really if you think about, if we were to try to put mobile device management on people's BYOD devices individually, it's very cumbersome. The users don't want to do it. They're not going to say, yeah, take over my device and have wipe capability. I've seen it many times. And then there are some companies that force it, and then they just say, I don't want to work here. I'm not going to sign this contract with you. So, it just becomes a huge burden in terms of device management. And, often I also see, you have to have a different device management software for Apple products versus Android products.
Yes.
And that gets to be a lot to deal with as well, especially when it doesn't quite work all the way and you're having to add more stuff to be able to do what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the stories, a team member, a few team members of mine, they were offered, you can take this phone, which is sort of a protected device, or you can put some MDM in your existing device to be able to access your email. And some of them are okay, but many of them basically said, well, I'll not access email at all, bringing down the productivity, because they didn't want to carry a second device. They don't want to be monitored, or it's their personal device. I don't want to add any an agent which can see exactly what I'm doing across my personal work as well as my professional work. So I think in Sonnet, the way we kind of solve the problem is that it's all a browser-based access. So if you are accessing an enterprise app, then you basically observe what's going on. But if you are going to another tab where you're going to your personal sites, nothing is observed at all. So we basically, from a enterprise access point of view, we help out from providing the best experience, make sure the apps are not slow. We provide data to IT to help the users debug issues and getting back online. But at the same time, since we are not agent-based, we do not see all the personal work. So you can use any device you want to access your tools from one company to another. Without worrying about deploying those agents, worrying about downtime and tickets. So it kind of helps the end user adoption as well as from the IT perspective as well.
I like that. I can see how that would definitely help with, like if you're dealing with contractors who do this all the time, most of them are pretty savvy and they figure out how to bypass controls because they used to be an IT person. And so, being able to protect yourself from people who are just trying to make sure they have full functionality on their device, but are inadvertently opening you up to huge issues would be great, because then you basically are removing the need for them to do any of that extra stuff that they have probably been doing for a long time.
Yeah, they just want the best experience. That's all. They want to be productive, get the work done, and sort of our tools are coming in the way. And I think that's up to us, the vendors, to be able to solve that problem for the remote workers. Mm-hmm. So I think let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, so we kind of touched on, from a security standpoint, I have very little ability to see what's going on in devices without, upper management saying, no, we're not going to make a policy that says you can see everything. Or, if we wait till something happens and then we force, hey, we need to see what's going on your device, it usually isn't very well received and it costs a lot of money. So it would really be nice to have a solution where you can see things without making your users angry or making them feel like Big Brother is watching you, and where they have control over, where they know that things are being tracked and monitored versus the rest of the stuff they're doing, like paying their bills or, trying to find a new daycare center. And then being able to know right away that something's happening is way better than, like my endpoint monitoring right now telling me after the fact that something couldn't be done.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that, see, visibility, observability sort of needed from IT perspective, but also from end user perspective, because let's say you are doing a new application rollout and they are struggling to use that application. They are firing emails. Well, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. It takes a lot of time to resolve that matter. But instead of that, if you can sort of, once a complaint comes, you can sort of record exactly to see what's going on. It's very easy to troubleshoot without, flurry of emails or getting onto the Zoom call, figuring out what's the common time slot. So I think that there are various advantages, both from the end user perspective and also from IT perspective. I mean, they get real-time alerts if, something is going wrong and then proactively solve the problem. Because I think ultimately, the users want to get the work done in a productive manner and not get frustrated by downtime or any of the other issues. So I think that, and I think, from a privacy standpoint, I think, like I mentioned, the way we have built it, that we do not watch everything. We just watch the thing that when you are interacting with the enterprise application or, your school application and nothing else. So it's kind of a good balance of getting the right degree of observability to solve the problems, both for the users and from an IT perspective, without impacting the privacy of the user at all. So they can use their personal devices or any device. They may have multiple devices. They can go from one device to another, and still get their work done.
That's nice. I think overall, there's very much a lack of, it's kind of like this IT space has been ignored for a long time. Everyone's just been using what they've been using and dealing with it and, explaining, oh, we don't have that, or, oh, this is how we do it, right? We're just used to it. So, just being able to move to something that's a little bit more feature rich and has more functionality that can be controlled with rules, I think makes a big difference. That traditional device management software just hasn't had it. And like I said, pretty much everywhere I've been, I've had to use 2 different software packages to manage between Mac devices and Windows devices and whatever else we have. Sometimes we have some that don't even fit in there. You can't. And so, you have a third process that you have to manage to be able to see what's going on and make sure that you're not missing patches and, whatever else you're trying to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that when we were building Sonnet, that was the challenge that we had in mind, that ultimately each person is going to have many devices. I mean, all of us have like 3, 4, 5 devices. And I think that, one of our customers, the head of IT, basically said that I don't want to spend my time chasing devices. What happened to this device, whether it has the right patch or right agent. And it's just too difficult, time consuming, and nobody's happy. The users are not happy. The IT guys are sort of spending time unproductively trying to chase devices. And I think that even then, I think you mentioned earlier, once the data is out in the device, it's kind of difficult to then control that data, to secure that data, because it's lying around in many, many devices. So now you have a very difficult problem. I think that it's a lot easier if you centralize the storage, the access control. So from user point of view, they have the same experience no matter what the device is, using that browser-based workspace. From an IT point of view, it's also centralized, where they can control the access and onboarding the right applications to the right group of users. So basically, I think that it's sort of a centralized model versus decentralized. I think that we can have the user experience of having them the right device that they love to use on their personal and professional work, and still be able to centralize enough that IT can control where they cannot go. And then they can also have the right set of tools instead of that digital overload, because they do not know how many apps which have to do what, etc. So they have just the right set of tools to get their job done, making them focus more on whatever job that they have. And so that sort of that workspace kind of concept essentially gives them the right tools that they have access to and essentially get the work done. And sort of have a workflow. You can even do sort of workflow from one device to another, from one application to another. So making them actually more productive using whatever device that they like to use or whatever browser that they like to use.
I think, it's worth mentioning that there's definitely time and place where we need to ship physical devices because there are full-time employees that we want to have a device. But essentially what I saw during COVID was we rushed to send Chromebooks out. We rushed to send whatever we could get our hands on because there was such a shortage of devices and such a need that we ended up with a whole bunch of different devices, went everywhere. And sometimes they went to people, like when I was working in higher education, they went to people who were probably not going to have any intention of returning them. And it turned into a massive issue where we had to spin up new departments to even try to do collection activities on devices. So I know it can't be only higher education that experienced this with, places that had 650,000 users, but I know that it happens with employee terminations as well, right? If they're not offering you much severance and you have a $5,000 laptop that's completely souped up as a developer, you're probably going to make a decision that the company's not going to be super happy with. And I have seen it, right? So there's also going to be times where you have a consultant that's like, no, I want to use my own laptop. So, it's nice to be able to have something that would allow you to have different policies that would allow for different types of employees working with different types of machine setups. And also be able to have, if you have servers that are sitting in a distant cloud somewhere, you could use that for that as well. And I think we always have an issue with, make sure your laptop is on and connected to the internet so we can push patches and antivirus. And like at the place I'm at, we just pushed maybe 20 things out on Friday and we had to remind everyone, make sure it's on, make sure it's connected. Otherwise, we have all these failures that we see on Monday and we have to go one by one to each person and say, let me remind you, we need to be connected so we can do this. So it'd be nice to not have to do that because it really is a huge drag on both IT and security to constantly be chasing people and trying to get them to do what they're supposed to. And then, even for developers and engineers, they get annoyed because sometimes it breaks their development environment because it's done after hours and they come in on Monday and they're completely not productive for the first half of the day. So they're like, no, I'm going to bypass every time because it broke me one time. So, that's a big issue, especially in application development environments, is that people just don't trust what's getting pushed out, and it becomes even more of a headache for us.
That's right. No, absolutely. I think you rightly said, sometimes you do need to ship devices, and that's perfectly fine for the cases where somebody's a developer or using some kind of, more sophisticated environment is what they need. But I think that even for those, for us, since we are browser based, it doesn't matter whether it's a corporate issued device or a personal device. For us, we are sort of device agnostic, so you can still access from anywhere. So based on the right use case, you can ship, but there is a big population that do not need ship devices. They may, like you said, Chromebooks is all they need, or their personal devices are all they need because they don't have the sophisticated use case. And I think that I have the same experience listening from our customers. It's not restricted to schools. Getting the devices back and compliance issues caused by that is a nightmare for lots of companies out there. It's actually a major issue, even with like cybersecurity companies.
The data that's sitting on there and the proprietary information, software, whatever they've downloaded to their personal hard drive.
Correct. Yeah, in one story, it was stuck in customs. They were trying to get the device back stuck in customs for months, and somebody has to constantly pursue customs to get the device back because otherwise you're not compliant. So yeah, I think there are lots of challenges, and I think that sometimes we do need to ship devices, but I think 80-90% of the workforce probably can do without it, and so we can sort of reduce the extent of the problem significantly. Just by this. That's why we kind of created this browser-based workspaces to access work from any device instead of sort of relying upon devices and relying upon the fact that it has the right software in the patch level to protect the data. So we kind of centralize, put the data in the cloud and control it there. Makes it a lot simpler for everybody to deal with the problem.
I like that. So we're just going to touch on our very favorite topic for a second, remoting into desktops and laptops and using VDI, which, I mean, every security person groans when you talk about remote access. So I'm sure IT loves it, because they can help a user who is usually difficult and takes a ton of time to close a ticket out. They can just hurry up and do it. But it's worth pointing out that a lot of the most recent breaches that have brought down companies are coming from man-in-the-middle attacks and social engineering that comes straight into the help desk, and help desk is overworked, turnover's high, they just barely are ramping up to a new job, and they get hit with the ransomware attack or some other attack that essentially brings the company to its knees. And it's happened to Robinhood, Caesars, MGM, tons of other ones that we probably don't even hear about because they're doing their best to figure it out and not tell everybody about it just yet, but it's becoming an everyday thing. So the days of being able to use remote access and VDI are going away very soon.
No, I completely agree. I think that's what we have been hearing from all our VDI customers, and when we pitch to them, they are ready to move on. They are actively looking for alternates. It's too costly. It's complicated to manage. It's very difficult to onboard users. Let's say you found the right skills from and then you want to basically onboard them quickly the next day. Well, you cannot do that. First, you need to, if it's an on-prem media, you need to rack and stack. You need to, put some software, operating system, patch it well, and so on and so forth. So it takes a week or two to get a person onboarded. And I think in today's world, where there's a remote trend of hiring gig workers or remote workers or contractors, they may be getting hired for hours or weeks. If let's say somebody is just doing data analysis or cleaning up data, person can be hired for hours. So how will this tool work in that case? So I think that, or shipping devices for that matter. So like all those trends basically is showing us that we need a different solution than shipping devices or VDIs. And I think that, from a user experience standpoint, also you need to ship thin clients sometimes. Sometimes it's like agent-based access. And I think that these VDI deployments were not built for security. They primarily were for compute, creating a server farm and managing that server farm, and managing the applications. So like the security is an afterthought, and you have to buy other point solutions, proxies and endpoint security and all that, and somehow put it all together, which is like burdening the IT tremendously and creating gaps among those point solutions. So what we did with Sonnet is essentially you don't need VDI at all. You need it's a VDI alternate, and security is fundamentally built in, and observability is fundamentally built in. So the platform ground up was architected for security. Besides providing the compute that you need to access all your applications. So even for like thick clients, we just we run the thick clients in our cloud and just stream it onto the local device. So essentially, we are reducing the amount of servers that you need down to just running your your server side. But from the remote access side, you do not need VDI at all. So you don't need that complex server farm and then maintaining. Instead of that, you can just remote access through the browser without requiring any servers. So yeah, this is definitely people are ready to move on, is what I'm hearing unanimously from our customers.
I think, just as VDI goes away and we start thinking about more secure ways of securing our workforce wherever they are, we start to think about, a lot of companies just went straight to remote work without even thinking about like, what is our policy? And if you ask somebody, they probably wouldn't even know if they were breaking a rule because, they have an acceptable use policy, but does anyone really know what's in there? You sign when you start the day of, and maybe you do your quarterly security training, but I bet you most people couldn't tell you what they're not supposed to do. They would tell you one or two things, like I don't go to websites I'm not supposed to, and I'm not allowed to have admin privileges on my laptop. But beyond that, they wouldn't know. There's no enforcement. Maybe we're blocking USB drives, but a lot of places won't do it. And so we really are not enforcing technical controls on these machines for the most part, and we're opening ourselves up to a lot of problems. So, that's something that keeps me up at night, is constantly like, okay, is the salesperson going to pick up a USB at a conference and infect the entire network because they're doing something in the middle of the night and our endpoint software doesn't catch it and I am not allowed to lock it down? Like all these little bits and pieces this is the basic stuff that gets us breached. This is the basic stuff that, basically causes us to spend a whole bunch of time trying to dig around and figure out what's happening when something is happening. So being able to put those controls in place and also being able to see what's happening is really important.
No, I 100% agree. I think this is one of the key causes of the breaches. And I think that the tools that we have developed, again, were not designed for like granular access control to these applications. So like VPN gives too much access, VDI, it's kind of restricting to a particular server, but then the server, you can use that server to access anything internally or go to all these SaaS applications. So none of the tools were designed for a granular access control. And I think that the other challenge is that every single SaaS app or other private app that you use, everybody has access control. So now you have like so many knobs to take care of. So if you have one user using 10 tools, now you have to fix the access control everywhere. That's just too difficult and error prone. And then, when the person leaves, then nobody is there to sort of revert back all the controls that you gave to that person. So the way we sort of designed Sonnet is sort of like a layer of security on top of all these tools. And so you can provide those granular access control, or you can just provide, you are entitled to only these 10 tools or 5 tools, and that's it, nothing else. And so it again becomes centralized, and if becomes centralized, very easy for IT to allow only certain tools, and beyond that, what you can or cannot do within the tool, upload, download, go to this URL, not allowed to go to this other URL, and things like that. And this way, you can easily also onboard, offboard. So we talked about gig workers, and let's say their contract is done for after a couple of weeks. What ends up happening is that they still have access. Nobody bothers to like take it off because everybody's busy. This dearth of IT stuff. In this case, you can essentially a few clicks and all access will be gone. Like literally 2 clicks and the access will be gone. We are adding additional functionality where it's time-based. So after the contract is over, automatically all the access will be removed. And again, we can do all this because it's all centralized, as opposed to giving, tweaking knobs in every single application out there. But yeah, I think this is definitely a key, reason why all these breaches occur. And we tighten this control, help a lot, because even if you get breached, we were talking about, state actors attacking. I think that even if they can get in, if you have the right access policy, can still control how much damage they do. So this is definitely a key.
I don't want to cut you off, but when you showed me the demo, I really liked that just everyone's pretty much on board with SSO. And so now that we can take advantage of that, it's much better to tie the policies from one system to another versus having all these different one-off ones, because it is a nightmare to manage it. And I'm, essentially every day looking at people saying, oh, I don't know how to turn this person's access off because I don't have access to this system and this person's gone. And how do we do that, right? So tying everything to SSO and being one and done is an ideal situation for any of us that have to go through that nightmare. So I do especially like that about this software. I think
just to provide additional context of what Cass is talking about, is basically, in order for you to access tools, whether it's SaaS applications, thick lines, or any of the server access that you are doing, we extend the SaaS credentials to across all apps. And so all you have to do is to enter your SSO credential to be able to access all applications without worrying about authenticating again and again in different tools. So we manage the rest of the credentials, even if it's not SSO enabled app, we take care of that. And so for end users, it's just a single click experience without worrying about authentication at all. So we have a credentials vault where we manage, and this way, even IT can figure out if the passwords are weak. They can rotate the passwords without bothering the end users. Periodically, you can do it, every day if you want, because the end user is not impacted. You're not communicating new passwords to the end users, or they are having to change the passwords on their own. So essentially, one set of credentials, and you can access all your tools.
So I think we touched a little bit on, data loss protection and how expensive it is. And I mean, even recently, there weren't a lot of controls to keep a person who wanted to download something to their local machine. There wasn't much. Even if you look at the G Suite right now, there's very small controls that come with it that help you a little bit, but it's not enough. And if you want a data loss protection software that works, it's very expensive, very cumbersome to put in place. And so we really need something that kind of fits in the middle, that's not going to break the bank, not going to kill our teams trying to put it in place. And we can't have nothing, which is what we've had, right? People are taking data from here and there. That's how employee phone numbers get leaked, right? And then they get phished. And so it is a really big problem. And I'm hoping there's going to be more and more solutions that come out in various ways. But just being able to hit it at the user level, at the machine that they're at, I think that's the front line. And so if we can solve that problem a little bit at a time, it's going to make a big impact for our teams.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think this data loss monitoring and prevention, I think everybody is well aware that they need this, but they are either not able to afford it, or they are like, just too cumbersome, even if they can afford, because, just don't have enough cycles to be able to implement that. I've heard this story even from like cybersecurity, mid-sized companies, with the dedicated security staff and IT. That's sort of on the vendors to be not able to simplify these tools. And I think that what we are doing to simplify is that basically it's part of our workspace platform, DLP, and you do not have to deploy anything anywhere for your ability to control what users can download, upload. And so let's say if they're trying to download a sensitive file containing customer email addresses, for example, it can in real time protect from doing so without requiring any changes to the application. And whether it's a homegrown app or a SaaS app, it doesn't matter. All you really need is those centralized policies to essentially say, well, I do not want any email addresses to be downloaded or source code to be downloaded. And it works across all applications. Another challenge with DLP solutions is that these apps are so different from each other. And the DLP solutions work off of proxies, where you essentially have to, reverse engineer an application protocol to catch anything sensitive being downloaded. And that's too
false
difficult.
Positives and false negatives.
Yeah, exactly. So the way we built it is like, it doesn't matter whether, if the app is Gmail or Outlook and, you're downloading an attachment, or it's Box or Drive where you are downloading a file from, the DLP policies work as is. So when you say, just say, I don't want any source code to be downloaded from any of the apps. It doesn't matter what apps you have, or in future going to have some new apps out there, the policy will work with your current apps and the future apps based on the way we designed it. It's not a proxy-based architecture. That's why we are able to do so. But I think, this is like of huge importance. Even with large enterprises having very sophisticated IT and, spending millions of dollars, these attacks are not caught. A couple of years back, that Target attack where they ended up paying hundreds of millions of dollars in damage, they kept leaking the data for months before it was caught. So I think this is definitely the key. It can disrupt the businesses significantly. Enterprises can take the hit, but the mid-market, small businesses, they just die out. So I think this is of key importance for.
Users don't want to be monitored, but at the same time, we have to look at insider threat potential from either incompetence or lack of awareness, but also a lot of insider threats are, disgruntled employees or people who still have access because someone forgot to turn it off, and they're, they just feel like playing around and seeing what they can do, right? That causes maximum damage. So, being able to have a machine where, when I log into my employer, I cannot download anything outside of my shared drive that's allowed. But when I want to use my laptop, I log off and I do whatever I want to do in my own time. And, I could do multiple things on that laptop without worrying about somebody looking at what I'm doing. So it's kind of like, it goes back to, hey, you're aware that someone's watching, but you're aware of what they're doing, and you're aware of where your guardrails are, basically, and you don't have to worry about what's happening outside of that. So I think most people would be okay with that, being able to use their laptop, or being able to live within the confines of what their company is saying has to be done in a reasonable way.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think that we talked about user behavior. I think, it's also, I think insider thread is like 10-20% of the cause, but I think the main cause is, like we discussed, as the user error. So providing that guardrail, because what ends up happening is that, it's, like, say a developer is under the gun, under the timeline, and they say, well, I don't know what's wrong with this source code, just copy paste it into chat GPT, and then that's it. Now chat GPT has learned the code permanently, which might be your intellectual property or a secret source, and now that's it's out in the open. So people do think.
I was going to say, or my favorite, when they download it to their local machine because they want to do whatever with it, and then they're like, "Well, it runs on my machine." I'm like, "Okay." So yeah, not great.
That's right. Correct. Yeah, old-fashioned way, essentially downloaded some salary info, HR person, and now it's in the machine, and there was no malintent or anything. It just like speed of being productive under the deadline, and suddenly the data is leaked forever. So I think that this is hugely important, and that's why sort of we built it into our platform automatically. You just need to write like 1-2 line of policies, and you can control exactly what data is being downloaded or uploaded. And like you said, I think if it's your personal device, you can do whatever you want. And if you access any of your applications or websites that you go to, but when you are accessing an enterprise application, then you are controlled, and to be able to not accidentally download sensitive data. So yeah.
So I think as we come to our last two items on the list, it's worth revisiting the fact that all this stuff impacts IT help desk. It even trickles to our SOC and NOC activity, and upper management spends an inordinate amount of time thinking about why do we have so many tickets? Why do we have so many long tickets that are trying to be solved? Why do we have so many non-closed tickets, right? So much drama with tickets and trying to satisfy users, and also trying to patch. Like, I dread opening a patch report when I see red on the front cover because people don't leave their laptops on, or the server is not connected to the internet like it's supposed to. So, just being able to do anything to cut down on that amount of load. And, I was just reading that we're basically having skyrocketing turnover in IT help desk right now, and it's actually higher than all of IT combined. I think IT trends around 40%, and we're at 47 in the US with IT help desk turnover. So if you think about half of your team turning over on a monthly or every quarter basis, how are you effectively making sure that your people know what they're doing? And are they doing a good job if they're looking for a job all the time, or they're brand new, or they're 1 foot out the door? It's just not going to be good. And we're seeing the proof of that in all these breaches that are happening through very basic social engineering activities. So, we really need solutions that give us the real-time alert capability, so someone can work on it right away and not have to dig through the noise of huge logs, or something happened over the weekend and it's 3 days later. Do I care about it? Right? I care about it in the moment that it's happening, not later. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there to solve some of these very basic problems that create so much drag.
No, absolutely. I think we were discussing before the call. I think there is a dearth of cybersecurity professionals. There's a dearth of IT professionals, and it's kind of difficult to keep up. And I think one of the sources of this is that we have point solutions that are very difficult to integrate. So if you want to make a story of what happened exactly, if you were to troubleshoot, you have to kind of figure out among many tools to figure out what went wrong. And I think that's a lot of unproductive hours on a very key resource that we have in IT. I think that what we did basically there was that it's again Sign.io is a platform where we log all the activity across applications. That's the other challenge. Like if you have individual tools that the remote worker is going to, then you have logs in every single tool. Now you have to, if you want to make a story of what happened, you have to go everywhere and figure it out, or you take the logs out, put it in your SIEM solution. Now suddenly the SIM is completely bloated and you have like terabytes of data. It takes like a team of people to figure out. It's like a needle in the haystack problem. I mean, it's a lot better if you do real-time alerts. So let's say if you have set some policy rules of, not able to export certain data, and if you can just get that alert quickly, you can just reach out to the user saying, this is not allowed, or actually just give feedback right there and then. So there's no IT ticket at all, because you just explain, look, this file is not allowed to be downloaded. So we can give those prompts without changing the application itself on top of the application. So we kind of give that feedback loop to the end users without getting IT involved, so they can do more productive work. Um, and I mean, the other, I think, way of like, you talked about help desk, which is basically, some user is doing, a mistake. So it's a new application they do not know how to use. I think that, we need to be able to, instead of like getting on a Zoom call and sharing your session, figuring it out, doing a meeting. I think what we want to do is like, see, okay, well, if you are not able to do, let me see what you did. So you can potentially, record these sessions if there are any complaints, and watch what the user is doing and proactively solve the problem. As
I
opposed
honestly
to,
love that feature. When you showed it to me, I was like, oh, like a kid in the candy store, like half the time we're looking through a report and I see the same thing happen on the same machine and I'm trying to figure out what they're doing and I don't have enough data. Like it'll show me an IP, but they could be using a Tor browser and I don't know where they're going, right? So being able to actually see what they're doing is like game changer. And, then you just have to get upper management to be okay with doing that. But I would think, it only takes one or two near misses on a breach or some kind of an event where you're really impacted to say, look, being able to have forensic evidence in a video that will stand up in court if you have an insider threat. If you have somebody accidentally doing something, it's a very trainable, coachable opportunity to say, hey, this is what happened. Let's talk about how to do this differently next time, especially if they're doing something legitimate in their day-to-day work. And they're just like, I see a lot of developers in other countries because now we have the follow the sun model. They're up in the middle of the night, our time, we're asleep, their boss is asleep, right? They're trying to figure out how to solve some problem. And maybe they're trying to download a tool and they accidentally download something on the network. So those are legitimate work issues that happen all the time. And, being able to have a coachable moment is a big thing, right? So they don't feel like, someone's watching me and I'm just really trying to get my work done. So there's proof there in the positive side and on the side where some corrective action needs to take place.
Right. No, absolutely. I think, like I said, majority of the users do not have any malintent. They just, do not know how to use that tool, or they accidentally download something. And I think that all they need in the vast majority of the cases to be able to, see what they are doing wrong from a security point of view, but also like when you are doing application rollout. I mean, I have run into this, like, I'm using some new tool. I get frustrated as to like how to tweak the knobs to do the right thing, Jira comes to mind. I mean, it's so
a nightmare sometimes.
it's
I feel that way about Adobe products. Sometimes I'm like, I am not smart enough for this. I'm just going to give up. I'm going to go find somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, these tools are very, very complex. And, we had this, use case where, contractor was not able to figure out, well, I can't access certain project in Jira. And we could see what is he doing wrong. And then the problem was on the Jira side. We did not have the right permission or the right settings. But we could easily reproduce his problem. This is what he's seeing. And we fixed it without interacting with him at all. We just had to say, well, it's fixed now, go ahead. So it kind of helps in a variety of, it helps in variety of ways to like, help with the drain on IT and the help desk, and beyond just the security. Because I think the vast majority of the problems are sort of user related or new app. We do not know enough. And I think that it solves that problem very effectively.
I think fundamentally, any time and attention and energy we can shift back to technically skilled workers to do the work that they like to do and that they're good at and that we need their brains for makes sense, right? Because we've gotten into this thing where we're just in the slog of process or procedure and trying to do the things we have to do to stay in compliance. But really, people don't join IT jobs to babysit users or look through syslogs or, do the mind-numbing, tedious stuff that is happening because we don't have the right tool. So I'm all for whatever we can do to help people get back to doing what they love to do and not feeling like they need to leave their job because they don't have the right tools or they don't have, like even just a safe environment to do what they do best because they don't have what they need to do their job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is definitely an urgent problem to be solved. So
And I
yeah, I
think
think
we're
yeah,
last point now. So I always like to give a shout out to, hey, let's break down the silos that are existing in companies because I see it all the way from, tiny startups all the way up to, multinational global companies. We were just brought up that way, right? IT exists over here, security exists over here, but what happens is everybody buys tools and they don't talk to each other, and then we have bigger problems. So being able to look at things together as IT and security and saying, hey, how do we solve this food chain issue that starts with the user and ends at security problems, which impacts business, right? It impacts revenue, impacts productivity, keeps us from being able to focus on the things we really need to do, like driving revenue and protecting critical assets. We need to work together to figure out what is the tool going to do? Is it going to serve all these needs? And let's get like one tool instead of 5 tools, right? Because all that time that it takes to cover those gaps between tools is also a drag on everyone. And it would be nice to basically get us to the point where we're automating some of this stuff that's been around forever, right? Stuff is not new. It's just a new take on it, right? And we have more technologically savvy users who are, essentially taking over the work world as the boomers start to retire. We're going to have less of these seasoned users that need more handholding and real interaction with people and more people who are like, hey, give me what I need to do my job and get out of the way. So, we have to be able to do our jobs and monitor and maintain and make sure that we're keeping our controls. But at the same time, I really don't think we need to be so hands-on babysitting everybody all the time. We can automate a ton of this stuff, and it really will take collaboration from all the right people to make sure the tools get in place, approved, and that they work right, right? Some of it takes tuning and time to make sure that we have our policies mapped to what's happening and technical controls in place to make sure that people can't do stuff they're not supposed to do. So I'll let you speak to that
yeah,
last
no,
point.
absolutely. I think you touched upon 2 points. One is, I think from an end user perspective, like you said, they're all technologically savvy and they are quick learners, and they are used to certain tools. There's a level of understanding or level of expectation when they use, all these social media tools or any of the other tools that they go to, the SaaS sites, and they expect the same level of user experience with enterprise as well. But enterprise sort of a very different story when they go there, and they expect the same. And I think that and they're pretty smart, and they usually learn this like self-learning. They just figure these tools out, and they have the tools provide you the right way of learning without reading a lot of manuals or from both end user perspective or IT perspective. So we definitely need to like up level how we deliver security and access. And so that's why, in Sonnet, I think the way we did is like you can use any browser of your choice. So if you're a Mac user, you can use Safari. If you're a Windows user, you can use Edge or Chrome or any of the other browsers that you are used to access your work. So no matter which device, just pick your favorite browser to access work. All your applications, not just a subset. And I think from an IT perspective, it's definitely we need to sort of look at the problem holistically. It's not IT versus security versus observability, because ultimately when a user interacts with an application, there's a lot of data generated, and you can use that data from IT perspective for troubleshooting. You can use that data from security perspective for forensics. You can use the data to like help the end user be more productive, be more efficient, not get frustrated with all these tickets and so on and so forth, to sort of improve the user experience. So we need to sort of look at holistically, and that's why in our platform, basically, it's browser-based access. All security tools are built into it. Observability tools are built into it, from an IT perspective or from security perspective. So it's basically a complete solution to onboard remote workers in seconds, and it just all centralized from an IT point of view to be able to configure. Again, everything is through the browser, even from IT perspective. Observability is through the browser as well. So all you need from IT side, from end user side, just the browser to do all the work. I think lack of tool integration is the other aspect from a security perspective. If you have point solutions, then you created this gap between chunks of data, and then it's kind of hard to put together the entire story. And I think that with these advent of tools, LLM and Chat GPT, I think you need to be able to centralize the data and to be able to interact with that data using just the natural language. So we try to create policies such that anybody can write those policies. They just read like basically they read like English. There is no special language that you need to write those policies. Anybody can write, doesn't have to have like years and years of experience to be able to write them. So we made it really, really simple from an IT perspective, because I come from an enterprise background and I've seen the struggle from IT, from end users, and from even developers of those solutions, how difficult they are. And I think that, in today's world, coming back to the remote work and the trends, we need a tool, you know, like in sort of this non-enterprise world, we have these tools like Google Meet and Zoom and, this On24 that we are doing webinar on. It's all browser based, and you can talk about anything, you can interact with people. So that's why we kind of made it browser based to be able to interact with your tools as well, just like that, just like you do Zoom, just like you do Google Meet or any of your other collaboration tools. It's basically a SaaS service to deliver, to connect people with their work. Just like Zoom, it connects people with other people. So that's basically how we try to do. So, cater for all needs from end user and from IT perspective as well.
Perfect. I personally feel like after my demo that it's probably going to be a game changer, but I'm looking forward to trying it out myself. And I think we may have some questions that we may want to take from our audience.
Yep, so we have just a few minutes for a couple of questions, but let's go ahead and get started. So first question, for a company that has BYOD and non-traditional work hours, how can we toe the line between observability during work hours versus personal time on the same device without overstepping our position?
Yeah, so I think, like I mentioned, if you're using BYOD and doing any kind of personal work, nothing is observed at all. The way you access your applications is going to sign.io. So let's say it's a company called Acme, so acme.sign.io. So you will know exactly when you are being observed versus you are not observed. So there's a clear demarcation. So we do not violate the privacy at all.
Okay, great. Next question. When getting started with DLP, what sort of policies do you recommend implementing?
Yeah, so I think that data protection is the key. And so you can write policies based on the business you are in. If you are a hospital, you don't want to leak, let's say, patient information. If you are a software company, you don't want to leak your source code and so on and so forth. So you can easily write policies based on your content category to be able to avoid any kind of downloads of sensitive data or upload of PII data from both sides.
Okay, great. And this one may have been touched on partially a little bit earlier, but how do you talk about observability with users without them getting defensive about the idea that an organization is monitoring them?
Yeah, so that's right. So I think that today the reason there is a pushback is basically these are agent-based solutions. And so if you have an agent sitting on your device, everything is being monitored. And so we wanted to solve that problem. And so you will know exactly, let's say if you go to in your browser, a tab which goes through sign.io URL, so you know exactly that you are being monitored. But if you go to Bank of America on the same browser, in the second tab, you know that nothing is being observed. So it's a lot better from a privacy point of view, as opposed to today's tools where they are essentially agents sitting in the devices. The challenge with those tools is, like, even if you have a corporate issued device, you end up doing personal work also in the corporate device. That's how it is. You can't switch from one laptop to another. It's not even possible. So that's how we sort of solve the problem.
I think the key there is the difference is, if it's sitting on the device, you don't have any control over it because it's locked down as an admin privilege. But with this particular product, you have the luxury of having the user be in complete control of what they're doing. And so it's literally just remembering, oh, I'm going to go do something personal. I'm going to go outside of this tab that I'm on, and now I'm in my own world.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like those are all of our questions today, and we are just about out of time. But before we go, we'd like to again thank Cassandra and DM for that great discussion, as well as Sonnet.io for sponsoring today's event. Just a reminder, this web seminar will be available on demand starting tomorrow, so please feel free to come back and review. Have a great day, and thank you again for attending.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much for organizing the event. Thank you. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Great job, everybody. Thank you.